Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Today, I am joined by Elizabeth Redmond Cleveland, who is with the City of Berkeley. Elizabeth and I have known each other for 16 years. We met when both of us had previous roles. She did an economic development study for an organization I worked with, and I learned a lot from her at how the numbers work and how you actually tell the economic impact of things versus made up numbers like a lot of political leaders do. Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role with the City of Berkeley?
Sure. And it's great to be back with you, Jared. It has been a while, and I know we've run into each other at various conferences over the years. So it's good to have some time sitting down one to one and catching up a little more. My role with the city started almost 8 years ago. I'm in the Office of Economic Development, which sits within the city manager's office. Our whole remit is to support Berkeley businesses, entrepreneurs, community organizations, investors, property owners, pretty much anybody who's contributing to economic vitality in Berkeley. I specifically came from the economic development and economic competitiveness strategy consulting background. I lived last in London, leading up practice for a global corporation that had a lot of data and analysis behind economic impact studies, industry forecasts, and macroeconomic modeling. Even though I loved all the rich data at that firm, I didn't feel like I got to do work on the ground and meet. I started looking for where I could bring my love for clean energy development, energy efficiency, and green jobs together with a local organization that cared about economic vitality, that put me to work on the ground, not getting on airplanes and presenting PowerPoint slides and then never knowing what really happened from them. I met with someone I knew from graduate school at UC Berkeley, and he was heading up the Office of Economic Development at the time. He's now the head of our planning department, but he brought me over to that team. And I'm today the chief strategist of sustainable growth, which gives me opportunity to merge my backgrounds in sustainability and from a social and environmental perspective with my focus for over 15 years on economic vitality, economic sustainability.
Oh, one of the exciting things about the City of Berkeley is its partnership with the University of California. Being a leading research institution, having a ton of smart people there, innovative people. Can you talk a little bit about how the city partners with the university on this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I'd say the answer today is different than it might have been 15 years ago. For some that work in this world of economic development, there's a town gown tension that sometimes exists where we, the city, are the town, and the gown, the highly educated PhDs and grad, each do the things in a slightly different way. And because we're a land grant university, the university doesn't pay taxes to the city, and it can create some tension. Back in the old days, the university and the city did their own thing, or if they were colliding at all, it was for tense legal fights about how much the university would owe the city in terms of tax recompensation. But before I joined this job, a previous mayor of Berkeley started an initiative called the Berkeley Startup Cluster. The idea behind that was to do away with this whole town gown tension and leverage the innovation assets and talent at UC Berkeley. When I came into my role back in 2017, I heard about this Berkeley Startup Cluster partnership. I really wanted to understand, what was it? What could it do? Who could it serve? What were the real impacts? And so I did dozens, probably even at this point, hundreds of interviews with different innovation ecosystem stakeholders. Those are the founders of high technology, repeatable, scalable startups, as well as those that support them. Co-working space leaders, accelerator incubator leaders, the real estate brokers that represent the companies themselves or the places where they can go. There's a whole lot of people in the innovation ecosystem that live in Berkeley who've catered their business to support this thriving engine of talent at UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley Lab. I worked with them all to understand how the city and partners like the Berkeley Chamber of Commerce, or the Downtown Berkeley Association, which represents the business improvement district or the property owners in the downtown area just west of campus. And I tried to figure out how can we make the Berkeley Startup Cluster a meaningful partnership or network that will serve all these different community leaders and the founders and the university ecosystem. We're trying to make entrepreneurship a more central part of the value proposition of going to UC Berkeley. It's been a really successful partnership over the last several years. We made it much more structured. We have a website, cluster.com. You can see all the different startups operating in our city. In fact, we're just about to update that for 2024. But we do a lot of different things. Like we work on policy work that supports what founders and innovation ecosystem leaders say they need. About 10 times a year, we do a newsletter and it provides resources, information, grant opportunities, pitch contests, information about who's been in the news or who's gotten grant funding for the innovation leaders. We have a marketing campaign we do. It's a hashtag discovered in Berkeley. We feature really awesome, inspiring businesses that discovered something in Berkeley, as well as are physically located in Berkeley. Thus, you can discover them in walking our commercial corridors. And then we do a whole bunch of other things, like just at the discretion or needs of the startup leaders when they come to us. For example, in January, we're co-sponsoring an event with Berkeley Skydeck, UC Berkeley's premier accelerator, and the Women Entrepreneurs of Berkeley, the club we sponsor, hosted out of the Berkeley Chamber. It's a film screening called Show Her the Money about how challenging it is for women to raise venture capital and what a small percentage of the overall VC money that women attain. I have a panel afterward with some of our leading accelerator leaders and female founders about the challenges of raising venture capital. It's super lucky for somebody in an economic development position to have a UC Berkeley and a Berkeley lab in their backyard, because I don't have to do a lot of the running around to do business attraction like you might have to do in a lesser known and innovative place. There's so much creativity, ingenuity, patents, and Nobel Prizes within a few blocks of my office. It's really about how do we make the business operating environment and the policy and the culture one that supports the startup industry.
And for every economic development person who's listening to this, if you were wondering her secret to success, I think she just shared it's that partnership overall with everybody, whether it's a Nobel laureate or the city and the local businesses, everybody coming together. Can you send me some information about that? Because we're launching a health tech, sports tech startup incubator system here in Contra Costa County.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would
Components.
suggest if you are not already familiar with some of the UC Berkeley accelerator programs, there's two or three that I'll just mention to you. The Skydeck Accelerator is the flagship accelerator program out of UC Berkeley. There's Baker Labs, BAKAR, a lot of innovation in the life science or biotechnology space. And they're about to replicate that model for a climate tech hub. It might be something to look at what they do and the programming they offer, because that has been very successful. It just started a couple of years ago, and there's already 35 companies housed within that space. And there's the Big Ideas competition. It's for students coming up with a groundbreaking idea to solve a social or environmental challenge, make the world better. They get mentoring and support at early stage. And then there's a number of other programs, like one affiliated with the Berkeley Lab, Activate Berkeley. Activate started at Cyclotron Road, the road that winds north of campus up onto the hill where you see the cyclotron. They had an incubator mentorship program funded by the Department of Energy that supported science-based entrepreneurs to scale their businesses. And that's been super successful. Now they, instead of just Activate Berkeley, which was the Cyclotron Road property, they now have Activate Boston and Activate Remote. They've started different Activate mentorship cohorts throughout the US modeled after the one that started in Berkeley. So definitely check out any of those. And on that berkeleystartupcluster.com webpage, there's also a page that talks about some of the different accelerator and incubator programs we have.
Wow, that's cool. And definitely something that's unique to Berkeley, and why we do this is to talk about what's going on. We will have an episode maybe 2 weeks after this where we are talking to Todd Prey from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs talking about how they work with their startups and entrepreneurs and give support to our community here.
Is on the Berkeley Startup Cluster Steering Committee. He and I collaborate often. Hopefully, he'll say good things about me, and I'll say good thing about him. He's a pleasure to work with.
All right, well, now I'll have to include that and promote both shows. You talked about the life science incubator. Berkeley's becoming well known across the country and the world in the life sciences and attracting new businesses. What is the city doing to support that incubator and support those companies to attract them there?
I think I mentioned earlier a number of the areas the Berkeley Startup Cluster works, and life sciences is one of the biggest sectors that we think of when we say innovation sector. Based on the most recent data, it's a little over a third of our innovation sector in life sciences and healthcare. And so one of the big areas that I've just been working on very recently, and I'm excited to have closed before the end of this year, was to exempt research and development grant money from the federal government, like the National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, or at the state level, like the California Energy Commission or Department of Agriculture. A lot of these federal and state agencies give out R&D grants in the public interest, and a lot of the life science or biotech companies at their early days, they don't know yet for sure how big the market's going to be. They have this novel potential for something they can synthesize in the lab, or a new production technology might make it quicker or more effective treatment for a deadly disease, but they need to do R&D to test how scalable that idea is, if it's replicable. And so they get these R&D grants. And what we were finding was that at those early stages of growth, the company doesn't have any other income other than the R&D grant. But our city, like most others in the Bay Area, has an annual business license tax. And in our case, and many other cases in the Bay, it's based on gross receipts. So all the income you've generated. An early stage biotech startup, or any startup that's reliant on R&D grant funding from the government, was having to pay a percentage of that grant to pay for their business license renewal in the form of gross receipts tax. And so some of the founders told us, I've paid more money in the last couple of years to the city of Berkeley than to the federal government, because the federal government lets you exempt the tax, but you don't pay taxes on the money they gave you. We worked with the mayor, and then we got two council co-sponsors. Just when this was before our council last month on November 12th, and it ended up passing unanimously to exempt all government and philanthropic research and development grants from business license revenue taxation. That's really exciting because we have so many early stage life science companies. We're not talking about major big pharma in Berkeley. We do have Bayer, which has been a super important employer here in Berkeley for many years, one of the largest, if not the largest private sector employer in our city. But this R&D grant wouldn't apply to a company like that. It's really useful for an early stage company that's maybe in Baker Labs or in Skydeck, and just trying to get their feet on the ground and find their market and raise venture capital and figure out if they're going to be able to scale. That's one example of how we've supported life science companies. Another big area just passed in the last few weeks was zoning changes to quote unquote keep innovation in Berkeley. And that will make it much easier for a scientist, a biotechnology researcher to get a small office, less than 20,000 square feet, with the over the counter, quick, not debatable zoning certificate in those areas near UC Berkeley's campus. Our downtown, our Telegraph, our North Shattuck, it used to take you 6 months to get a discretionary permit to know if you could put your lab there. Now, if you find a small space that has the right dimensions for your team, that will be easier. Those are just two policy examples that I mentioned because it's taken us actually a couple years of work to get to this point, and they just came to fruition in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, the fast track permit thing, you can't minimize that. That comes up in economic development conversation. No matter the business, how can cities work to improve that? Especially small changes when you're talking about changing office walls, or what is the definition of retail? I was in a meeting a week ago that a city was saying, no, we don't allow retail in our downtown core. It's like a real estate office or physical therapy that has storefronts. it has to be a restaurant or somebody selling like clothing. Why? If it's foot traffic, build foot traffic.
A lot of when you read zoning codes, asking yourself why. I think it's important to ask those questions, and that's something that's not always met positively by our planners, but we've developed a good relationship with them over the last few years where we can ask those hard questions of why, and they are willing to work with us to dig in. And maybe something was passed a decade or more ago, and nobody really knows why. And so it's time to revisit that.
Or 30 years ago.
Exactly.
I used to work for a state senator in Florida in the 90s, and he every year would sponsor like a dozen bills cleaning up old language. There used to be a bill like you couldn't, Florida, the orange state, you couldn't peel an orange in a hotel room. And it was like, do we need this? Is this a problem? Is anybody actually enforcing this? In the labs and life science companies, a lot of the life science companies, you need significant amount of power, significant amount of broadband speed. How is Berkeley working with PG&E and others to increase power? Because it's an issue whether you're in Vacaville or Livermore, the lack of power has definitely hurt people.
Yeah, I would say PG&E is generally the place that the companies have to go to get power. We've heard some of those challenges as well as long lead times before they can get hookups. Our new facility at Berkeley Commons just came online. It's off the I-80 between University Avenue and Ashby Avenue on Berkeley Aquatic Park. It's a beautiful new LEED certified facility right on the running bay trail that goes all the way up and down the coast. But yeah, they were contacting us like, oh, we really hope we can get power because it's
Mhm.
gonna take a long time. We don't have a specific city generation program that could help these life science companies get their power quicker. Sometimes with heavy manufacturing users that need more power than is currently there today, they have sometimes considered going elsewhere to places that do their own municipal power because perhaps they can deliver on that quicker than PG&E. So it might be something the city wants to think about if we hear more examples like that in the future. In general, what the city and not my department, but our Office of Energy and Sustainable Development are really interested in electrification generally. And so that also has challenges. Like if we actually just had, not we being the city, but the lowercase c, City of Berkeley, on the November ballot was a measure that would have required a much higher rate for per therm of natural gas. The whole idea behind it was to get people to switch over to electrification instead of using gas. But with the analysis that we were running and looking at, PG&E wouldn't have been able to hook up that amount of power had everybody converted where they're using gas by the ballot measures deadline of starting the tax on January 1st. There's no way we could have switched everybody over to electric sources of power. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges in general for our city is thinking about how do we introduce and encourage low carbon sources of power and electrification, but in a way that can work with PG&E, who is our utility. Although they're managed by AVA Community Energy, it's a community choice aggregation. A lot of the sources are renewable.
Let's talk about economic development in Berkeley past these incubator type companies and
Mhm.
what's coming there. How are you attracting other businesses to the city, both white collar and the next coffee shop that everybody wants on their corner?
A lot less of my job is business attraction, and it's much more a focus on existing business support and business creation. One thing that's great about I keep saying I'm lucky, and I do think I am. Berkeley is attracts businesses without us having to put city money into big business attraction campaigns because it's just a really nice place to live and work. It has the intersection on the I-80 corridor with San Francisco. It's on a BART line, and it's next to the university and the lab, and it has a lot of brilliant students coming from all around the world and international tastes, and artists have been there for many years. We actually have a very diverse economy and a diverse set of shoppers or patrons that want to frequent those stores. We don't have to do a lot of micromanaging of who goes in what spaces. People recognize there's a market opportunity there and there's a refined palate that you might cater to. But what we do was a lot of things to support what we might think of as storefront, mom and pop, independent, local serving businesses, in addition to all the work we do to support the innovation sector. With the local serving businesses, we support a number of business improvement districts, as you already mentioned, you're a part of, but they're funded in different ways, either through the property taxes or in some cases a business license tax, and in some cases it's a volunteer. So it's not a formal bid, but it's a business network like the Gilman district or the Lauren district around the Ashby Bart, the South Berkeley area. Those two are volunteer run today. We support them in whatever they think is most useful. Like in the Lauren, they wanted a mural that helped brand Lauren as a destination. The city worked with them on that. And then the Gilman district, they started a Gilman district fair that they do once a year. They have a drinks district. They put together a website. The city works with the districts to help them identify what are some of the needs that will support those local serving businesses and how can we help them get not only funding, but like more thoughtful and strategic about what they ask for and how they organize themselves. We do the Discovered in Berkeley marketing campaign, which isn't just for the companies making a discovery in Berkeley, but for a really cool, shop or coffee roaster or something else you can discover in Berkeley. We feature all the fun stories of those kinds of companies on our Instagram at Discovered in Berkeley and also on the website. And then we sponsor stories in our local paper, Berkeley Side, about those companies. We try to really tell the narrative of what is cool and exciting and values aligned about the businesses that we feature in that campaign. And then there's also different sectors that are not necessarily local serving, like manufacturers. For example, that's another big part of our West Berkeley history, the industrial part of Berkeley. We try to make the community aware of what's made in Berkeley, that they can shop local, buy those products, but also what are the needs of the manufacturers from a policy or workforce perspective. We'll convene them for roundtables and communicate their needs. We just this year did another round of Berkeley Manufacturing Week where we had 17 tours for the public to see what's made in Berkeley and expose people to production that's still happening today in Berkeley. In addition to your cute coffee shop on the corner and your innovative tech startup, you also have people making composite materials and manufacturing thousands of mochi muffins per hour, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then there's other things too, low interest loans that we offer, parklets, we offer grants for artists. So we really try to think of all the different drivers of our economy and then how can we best support that industry given the relatively limited budget that our office has.
Talk about that low interest loan program because that's come up in a bunch of economic development meetings that I've been in, and people have been encouraging cities to start them because interest rates are so high right now for small businesses.
I wouldn't call it low interest today because it's pegged to interest, but our revolving loan funds, it historically came from the US Economic Development Administration. It's for companies that have been denied access to a commercial loan. It's money you wouldn't otherwise have if couldn't access it. We work with a Bay Area organization called Working Solutions. They'll do technical assistance in addition to managing the loan product. We're in the process of converting from having our own program serviced by the city, which takes a lot of resources and can be cumbersome, to having Working Solutions be the carrier validating the loans and going through that process. I would point people toward Working Solutions as an example of different types of loan products that cities can partner with them to tailor to their local community needs.
I think that's helpful at just giving an example for other cities to look into and do their own research. You talked about having a role in sustainability, even though that's not your department, and I know that's a passion of yours. You talked a little bit about electrification, but what are some other things you're doing to work with the businesses to make Berkeley a worldwide leader in sustainability, which it has a history of doing?
I'd say one thing I kind of splits into two different types of businesses. There's the innovative technology businesses that are creating the solutions that can make the world lower carbon. For example, there's a company in Berkeley called 12. They split apart carbon dioxide, CO2, to make a syngas. It's like a input They can go into, in this case, they're providing it to Alaska Airlines and 8 different airlines in Europe for a low emissions aviation fuel. It's a really cool company. They've been on news and you can Google them 12, but working and supporting companies like that with whatever they need, attracting talent, finding space, getting the R&D grants, tax credit, whatever else. We want to see companies like that succeed because they
Yeah.
provide solutions that help everybody else to fly on an airplane with less CO2 emissions, or there's companies that do sustainable materials that aren't petroleum-based products. There's other companies that have renewable energy technologies that we've worked with, like Bellwether Coffee. They have an electric coffee roaster that doesn't require gas to power it. Part of our job is to understand the technologies that can be used and make sure the companies developing those technologies are successful. And that's the work we do through the Berkeley Startup Cluster. The other part of it is for mom and pop local serving businesses we talked about earlier and looking at how they can green their operations all around. That's not just about electrification, but having less waste or zero waste wherever possible, using compostables or renewables, reducing water consumption, increasing their energy efficiency. And to do that, we partner with the Alameda County Green Business Program, which is also one of the chapters of the California Green Business Network. The team we work with there has been really amazing. Whenever we see a company that we think is potentially interested in sustainability or is already taking leadership, we connect them with the Green Business Program to do a full audit and walkthrough of their operations and their footprint and look at ways they can operate more sustainably or better promote what they're already doing that is leading edge in that area. And then we talked about like the cool things happening up at the lab, but we just signed a letter of support for the Berkeley Labs Impel program. They're trying to develop building technologies that will decrease carbon emissions and would love to do a pilot in Berkeley. I'm excited to see if that's something we can do more of in 2025.
I think how you go above and beyond at the City of Berkeley and not just attracting the big businesses, but you are very actively engaging small businesses to educate them and help them reach their goals.
Yeah, and I love it's like one of the fun things when I learn about a new technology that has a positive impact on society or decreasing our environmental impact on the world, I connect them up to a potential customer or pilot project. Just in the last week, I was at the Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. They have something called the Collider Cup. They do it twice a year per semester. It's like the top UC Berkeley students have developed a business plan or a business model. During the course of a semester, they get to pitch their idea to see if it can become a real endeavor in the world. I always try to go to those. And I just was at one on Friday where I heard about, and this is not necessarily about environmental sustainability, but about resilience to we just had that tsunami warning. And then we had the tornado warning. They have a disaster response system that integrates like drone footage and all different sources of data, which today are not connected for cities. When they were pitching it, I was listening to it. I was like, oh, this is something the city of Berkeley might be interested in. Another company emailed me last week, and I think I'm talking to them tomorrow. They make insoles for your shoes made from the company is Aris Composites, but they have a composite material on the insoles shown to have much better long health outcomes for people using these insoles. And I'm going to learn more tomorrow. I don't want to speak on behalf of what they're about to tell me, but they've had some pilots that have shown really positive health impacts for the users. They were like, we'd love to work with you and get these on the firefighters or police force. I was like, this is fun, right? We get an innovative technology that's being developed here in Berkeley. And if we can find a match for that to actually be piloted or used by a Berkeley customer or the city, even better. I get to do that matchmaking and see it on the ground here.
Let's talk about the Bay Area's homeless problem.
Oh, we don't have that problem. Ha ha.
I've heard from other elected officials in the area that say they don't have the problem in their city either. How do you think it impact Berkeley's economic vitality?
Yeah, actually, we do have that problem. It's actually very serious and it's extremely challenging for business owners. I think important thing to mention is that it's not the fact that people don't have housing or that they're unhoused that's the problem. It's all the things that happen when you aren't housed or the reason you aren't housed that is the problem. Either people with extreme mental illness that are not safe to be around being on your streets, or people who aren't housed not being able to live in a clean way and creating a lot of extra trash or debris and attracting rats, using drugs and then discarding their needles. I think it's important when you talk about homelessness that you say the challenge isn't with the unhoused people themselves. The problem is that those people are not able to be contributing members of society and sometimes make it harder for other people that are trying to be productive and healthy in the nearby surrounding area to do work. Business owners have a really big challenge with it from a number of levels. Some of those people that are mentally ill are using drugs, which has some correlation with the unhoused, threaten their employees. In fact, they have attacked, murdered, raped patrons. And that's scary for the workers and the people that are buying from these storefront businesses or have to leave work late after working on software coding till all hours of the morning. Just doesn't make Berkeley or anywhere in the Bay Area that has this problem feel comfortable. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do in Berkeley. We've gotten a lot of grants from the state. We've leased different hotels so that we can offer people housing. We also have a whole team that you don't have to call the police when you see someone who's mentally ill. They could do a wellness check and help those people get them some resources, find them a path forward without putting handcuffs on them. Unfortunately, some of these solutions have been successful with small populations, but then there's always another group. I just heard that in downtown Berkeley, our count of people on the street has rebounded to be higher than it was a few months ago, even though we're doing all these great pilots and invested a lot of resources. Frankly, it feels like a really challenging problem for the city to face. And there's also a lot of advocates that are against doing anything to move encampments out of the way or to ask people to vacate a space that's in front of a building. And so you just have to navigate that really carefully because the city gets sued again and again.
The safety aspect has come up in a couple of conversations with what's going on in Oakland. We had Brett Premola from Sassoon City talking about how to grow his economy, the first thing he needs to do is just hire more police officers. Because I can't necessarily send somebody to a domestic violence call or a drunken thing because they're at the domestic violence call. I just need more police to keep everybody safe.
I think when people sometimes ask me about economic development, all these other things I mentioned, they're really secondary to having a safe place for people to live and work. Even though it's the Berkeley Police and Fire Department on the front lines, not the Office of Economic Development, if they're not able to do their job well and our community isn't safe, it doesn't matter how many policy initiatives and marketing campaigns you pass for research and development, or cute storefronts, or livable streets. You need people to be able to get to and from work or the grocery store safely. The city's support for safety is actually support for economic vitality.
This is a forward thinking question. If you're looking at Berkeley, which has always strived to keep its charm and its reputation 12, 20 years from now, if you're continuously successful in your job, what do you think Berkeley looks like?
The most important thing that I always think about, because you never know what the future is going to bring, is that you have economic diversity. We've seen this to be really important in Berkeley. If you're really dependent on one industry and that industry was film or cars or something that is no longer being utilized in abundance today, you can suddenly turn into a wasteland and have to rethink. But if you have a range of different industries, like life sciences has gone through boom and bust cycles over the years, and restaurants come and go frequently. During the pandemic, people weren't able to do things in person, and that decimated arts and in person things. But then we had software industries doing great at the same time. If you think about how can we not have overly restrictive, as you talked about earlier, zoning rules, don't give tax credits to one specific type of company you're trying to draw there. You are open to what are some of the trends and look at the companies that are innovating in those spaces and welcome them to your city, you can always have a balanced portfolio of what's creating economic activity. And I think that's more important than picking and choosing what you want on your main street. Allow some versatility and be flexible to an ever-changing environment. What we really try hard to do in the Office of Economic Development is not dictate where the world is going, but be receptive to changes. And then I think another big area of what does it look like in the future, not only do we have a diverse economy, but we have elected officials and city bureaucrats that think about business as an important stakeholder in our community, in addition to residents. They listen to what those businesses' challenges are and think outside the box about solutions. A city that doesn't just say, no, you can't do that, or this can't be because it's always the way it's been, will do much better at continuing to have a thriving economy because they'll be receptive to what's being asked of them and what's the new, I don't want to even say new hot thing, but the thing that's creating livable jobs, a high quality of life, and vibrant streets.
Anything else you're working on that you want to share?
There's a lot of things we're excited about for the year ahead. Right now, we're hiring somebody, so hopefully they'll bring some new ideas and we'll have a different team in 2025. We're re-envisioning our civic center. We're looking for some funding for that, but that would create a really beautiful space, right? A block or so from the downtown Berkeley BART station, 2 blocks from UC Berkeley's campus. That would be more of an icon today. The Civic Center Park and our City Hall are not an icon of the community or something that draw people together. That's one of the things our team will be working more on next year. My boss asked me this morning what I was interested in working on in 2025. I wrote back that I am interested to see how I can use AI more. I don't want to miss that ship because all of us in government have paper files sometimes and things are not efficient. It's hard to think about using technology when I still have to print 40 copies of something to go to a council meeting. But I think it's really important to think about opportunities where I can leverage AI to improve my work or
Yeah.
productivity. I set that out for myself to think about what those opportunities are in the months ahead.
That actually is on my list. I always ask some tech people, what's a cool tool to save time? I've gotten to talk to higher ed and some cities about embracing AI. In higher ed, they said 2 years ago, people were making fun of ChatGPT and said it would never take. Today, they realize their students are all writing their papers with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
How do they now incorporate it? It's forcing, particularly education, high schools are going to get left behind because they're so slow to adapt. But higher ed is racing to how do we incorporate these tools? How do we make this part of it versus not offering it or not acknowledging that it's happening?
Absolutely. We're having this conversation this
Government is,
weekend. Government will maybe not be the quickest to adapt that on all fronts, but that's to its peril. So I think that we all need to think about that in whatever job capacity we're in. I think AI in some format is here to stay and it's only going to be getting better. We need to think about not only the safeguards and protocols to not have catastrophe come from that, but also can we use it in a really positive way that gives us more free time or allows us to work on the things we're passionate about, not just the things that are more routine in our jobs.
that's great. I love that insight. And that should be a future 20 podcast episodes where we talk about AI use in government. Today, I appreciate you sharing everything you're working on and what is going on in Berkeley with Elizabeth Redmond Cleveland. Thank you for joining me.
It's been great to talk with you. Reach out to me anytime if there's anything I could do.
Yeah. Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.